오토데스크 코리아는 모 카페와 함께합니다.
이번 인터뷰에는 글로벌 executive creative director인 잭 아라토 씨를 인터뷰해 보았습니다. 잭 아라토 씨는요 1세대 CG 아티스트며 유명한 디즈니나 비니언 스튜디오 또한 케어스크롭과 함께 세미나도 하시며 호주에서만큼은 매우 잘 알려진 아티스트입니다. Hello Zach, how are you?
I'm good, thanks Mike, how are you?
Thank you. Thanks for the setting of my interview.
Yeah, no, it's great to be here.
That's good. So I've got a couple of questions for CG artists in Korea, and obviously you worked with me in Binion Studios, and I do know some parts of you, but I'm pretty sure you're one of the well-known CG artists in Australia. So I think it'd be really good to Korean CG artists to know who you are and what other people from other side of the world are doing with your career, things like that.
Yeah, sure.
You got massive experience. I'm just wondering, can you tell us the places you've worked for in the past?
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I've actually started doing CGI since 1997. So I've been in the industry just over 25 years now. Now, very early on in the days, I started with programs like Lightwave and version 2 or 3 of Max, alias Wavefront. So I sort of, before I got into architecture viz, I was doing a little bit of VFX work in the film industry on the Gold Coast in Australia. And then I got into sort of multimedia animation as well for educational CD-ROMs at the time. And around about 2004, worked an internship at Disney for a little while, and then got into ArcViz. And I think it was 0.9 beta of V-Ray at that time.
0.9. They don't even call it one. They call it,
no, it was 0. It was like 0.93 something like that of V-Ray.
Right. Okay.
It was in beta. It was a company called Orbit Solutions, working in South Melbourne at the time. Then got offered a position again up in Sydney, working on the Palm development in Dubai. So that was around 2005. I was in Sydney working on that. So working on the Palm, working on the World development as well in Dubai. Moved back to Melbourne and took up a creative director role at Atomic 3D, and that's where I sort of really spent a large portion of my time. I spent 8 years at Atomic, but after 8 years of being with Atomic, I decided to sort of move on. I got a studio. I became a studio manager at Maze Visual. Was there for about 2 years, and then decided that Maze was a little bit small for me and wanted to get back into sort of a bigger studio. So that's where I came and joined Binion.
And you sat right behind me in Binion, right?
Yeah. Okay. So when I first started in that little small office.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we had like 4 people.
Anyway, like I was with Binion for about 7-8 months. Whilst I was there, I sort of got offered a role to go and work at Hoyne in Sydney. So I went up to Hoyne, but I didn't really enjoy working for Hoyne. It was a small 3-man studio set up within Hoyne. Hoyne itself as a company was great, but the art team there was just, it was trying to be a Binion, but like just wasn't big enough to try and then I got offered the role to come over to Thailand and be a creative director for Deercreek. So came over, was at Deercreek for 2 years, and then decided to go out on my own and start my own studio in Thailand, and ran that for almost 2 years as well.
I think if you're living in Thailand and if you want to develop your career and if you want to go in a better path, you would want to go into a more developed country like Australia, States or whatever. But I wouldn't call it underdeveloped. I would probably say less developed. Why did you decide to go to Thailand? I mean, you could go to New Zealand, States,
Yeah.
What made you go to Thailand?
Well, I mean, okay, so when I first came over and joined Deercreek, the money was actually quite good. So it was it was an equivalent Australian salary of like what I was getting as a creative director in Australia. Was about 110,000. Yeah, and then like the cost of living was, was a quarter of the price of like what I was paying in Australia. So I was saving a heap of money.
All right, I heard you're V-Ray certified. Yeah, Zach?
Yeah, I am V-Ray certified.
So, like, just a question. Like, everyone knows about there's a V-Ray certification in Chaos Group website. To be honest, people don't know what that is actually for. People are really curious that does it really affect Agve's career, like your own career, or does it actually change anything as an artist?
Yeah, so I did the V-Ray certification program when I went to Italy in 2013. Is it a requirement in the industry? Absolutely not. Is it a nice thing to have? Yes. Does it teach you V-Ray better than anybody else? It's a way to sort of know yourself exactly the best way to actually use the render engine. When you go through the V-Ray certification, there is a training program that goes along. So Chaos Group actually teach you their way of using the render engine.
So in the past, you had a few roles as a creative director. What do you guys actually do?
Yeah, so it's a good question. When you sort of get to a creative direction role within an ArcViz studio, you're pretty much not on the tools as such on a project. You are very much in a leadership role at that point. And so you're overseeing a team of artists. Usually you oversee art directors, or sometimes, like in Binion's cases, when we worked there, you would have a team. So you would have a senior associate manage a team of 4 or 5 people. Creative directors, their role is to work with the client or the account manager and make sure that the overall project, the look and feel is there, and that all the information in terms of like the visual development, what is actually going to be provided in terms of how many images, the animation, what's the style, the mood, the tone, all of that kind of thing, the music selection, it's all managed by the creative director.
All right. So from the creative director role, when you came to Binion Studios,
took a step backwards
as a became an artist rather than a leadership role.
So when I came to Binion, it was 100 people between the Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne office. So it was a much bigger studio to step into, and they already had well-established creative director. They didn't have a lot of other creative director roles. Like they pretty much had one creative director at each of the studios at the time, senior associates, and then senior artists, and then mids, and then junior artists. So what I wanted to do was just take a step back into just a senior art role. I didn't need it to be a leadership role. But it also gave me an opportunity to get to know other artists like yourself, and see what I could learn from other artists, and what I can learn from from the senior associates, and what I can sort of glean from the business overall, and how did the bigger operation work as opposed to working in a smaller studio.
Everyone's got this hype about Binion,
right? Yeah.
The Binion title. Yeah, if you're from Binion, everyone's like, wow. Yeah. Why do you think that's happening? Because obviously, there's D-Box, there's MIR, there's Mir, and they don't really say about anything about those studios, which they are great. Like Gabriel Saunders, they're amazing. But when you come from Binion Studios, everyone's like, wow, you're from Binion Studios?
Well,
Why do you think that's happening?
Yes. Okay, so before Binion, it was you had D-Box, and you had Neoscape in America. So they were huge. You had Kilograph in California, also very big. Steel Blue in San Francisco. So, you know, Binion, I think why it's become sort of well known now is because when it started, it was only a small, you know, five person studio. It wasn't a big mammoth thing. They were aggressive in their hiring of, you know, good quality artists to push out good quality art, but also to become, you know, one of the best studios in the world. That's their aim. Not only one of the best studios in the world, but one of the most expensive studios.
Okay, so this is probably the off-topic question, but you've been working with me for a while at Binion Studios, and how was Michael at Binion Studios?
That was Michael Park at Binion Studios. Mike Park, who used to make the coffee, you can cut that out. How was working with Michael Park at Binion Studios? No, I actually really enjoyed working with Mike. You know, you did some great work. I don't think there's anything that I really looked at where I went, nah, it was terrible. It was very, very consistent in what you did. Given the time frames that we had to work for at Binion, it was tough because you were having to produce 2 or 3 images a week. And that's new images and also then update old ones. And yeah, so there was a lot.
Let me just call it Binion 3.0.
3.0. All right.
You remember that, right? Oh, thanks for that anyways. So I've got some questions making imagery.
Yeah, sure.
There are some artists saying models not really important, and some people say texture's most important. And obviously every single stage is important. But out of all those stages, or from modeling, texture, lighting, styling, post-production, which part of the process do you think is most important and why?
Depends on really what you want to do. Are you producing a room scene, or are you producing an actual object? If you're trying to create a room, then just go and, you know, get whatever sort of free models you can to put into the scene to start with. Practice, you know, arranging those. Look at sites for reference.
Basically, styling.
And even, I mean, like look at styling magazines. Like if you look at a brochure for like a furniture catalog, that's usually a great way to sort of start in terms of seeing how things are composed, put together. Colors also, you know, what works, what doesn't sort of work.
Thanks for that. There's also like lots of students as well, and some CG artists that's already in the industry. I kind of recommend them to work for a bigger studios. If you're gonna work for a company anyway, might as well work for or search for a company that's well known or makes great quality, so you can learn a lot from them. Obviously, it doesn't really mean that you won't learn anything from the smaller studios, but what I'm saying is I think it's much better to work for bigger and top studios. But what's your view on this? Do you think there is you've been working for a big studios and small studios, what's your recommendation?
Yeah, okay, so you're right, I did. I started off working for a big studio in ArtViz, and then went to smaller ones, and then came back to a bigger one, then went back to smaller ones.
By talking at render engines, you know, Chaos Group is doing pretty good for now. Yeah. But, you know, everyone knows that they're pretty late in the game engine industry with the real-time engines and things like that. Nothing's really happening, like, not as they promised. Obviously, there may be some delays, but nothing's really happening compared to what Epic Games are doing, what D5. I mean, D5 just came out maybe 2 years ago, and they're doing way better than Vintage. What's your view on this? Like, where do you think they're going? I know they've recently like going with Enscape, and maybe they're trying to use that like to motion for Epic Games. what do you think where they're going? I think they're kind of lost, and I think they're trying to buy something instead to speed up the game.
Yeah, so a lot of it is for like advantages, primarily for sort of the ArcViz industry in terms of doing something like Enscape, where they're connecting real time, being able to manipulate a design model and see some real time rendering back. The other one is for previs. I know that like Chaos Group is big into the VFX industry now and like doing a lot of previs work. So that's where it's useful for, and then you don't have to use. Look, I know that Vlado actually like talked to Epic a few years back and was looking at developing V-Ray for Unreal Engine, and they have a version of V-Ray for Unreal, but that was more so that you could set up a scene in Unreal Engine, and then you could render out a still using the V-Ray render engine and use that BIOS based render engine for producing sort of a nicer result than what the real-time render engine was, and that was before Unreal 5 came out. Now, since Unreal 5 came out, there's been big improvements in the engine about like in the best way.
Do you think one day, maybe one day, but like for the next 5 years, do you think the real-time engines will replace either Corona or V-Ray?
No, because I mean, look, bias renders and unbiased renders all have their place. So it's not a case of like Unreal Engine trying to replace V-Ray, because there's things in like Unreal Engine that you can't do that you can do in like in a bias render engine like V-Ray. So we're a long way from that whole everything just being real-time rendered, put it all in.
It's a final question. What's your plan in the future for your career?
I've just joined with an Australian company as the global executive creative director and studio manager.
And that's a very long and big title, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so I'm the like for all of the studios for the Australian company. I'm the number one creative director for it, and I'm also the studio manager for the Bangkok office.
Oh well. Okay.
So yeah, it's a fast-growing company. It's a fast-growing industry that we're in. We're not in ArcViz, but we are very much in 3D.
So what are you actually making? Like, what are you creating?
So yeah, the company is actually doing augmented reality furniture. So it's all furniture rendering and marketing and advertising for furniture manufacturers around the world.
Like big companies like Minority.
Yes.
Is that your target or?
Yeah, even bigger. Like companies like Target.
Target. Oh right, okay.
Target, Kmart. We're probably producing about 4 times as much furniture as what IKEA is churning out in terms of 3D production. Right,
okay. So if I just calculate how much you guys are earning, that's millions.
Yeah. So it's pretty big business.
Well, congratulations on that. Yeah. Okay.
That's what I'm doing now, and that's where I plan to be for the next at least 5 years.
Yeah. Do you remember the time I kind of stood behind you in Binion, and I said, "You got potential."
Now, hang on, didn't I do that?
I got good eyes, right? I got good eyes.
Yeah, no, wait. Didn't I say that to you? Wasn't it me standing behind you saying, I think you got potential?
Yeah. Well, thanks for the interview. I wish you the best for your future, and so yeah. Yeah. Keep in touch, and do this again maybe in a year's time, and you can see how we've those
gone.
gold rings and gold teeth and everything. Yeah.
I don't think so.
No,
That's
you
not my style. Maybe the gold rings, but
Yeah.
not the gold teeth. Definitely not the gold teeth.